hardest part, the one that still makes my breath catch in my throat, wasn't reading the declassified mission logs or seeing the terrifying G-force charts. No, the moment that truly shattered me was a blurry photograph, a simple gray tombstone flat on the earth, and sitting right on top of it, two perfectly ripe, bright yellow bananas. It was an offering, a tribute to a little creature who never asked to be a hero. It was the physical proof that a piece of my own soul had been irrevocably tied to this history. Tell me honestly, was I insane to let the fate of a squirrel monkey's memory become the central driving force of my life, the very measure of my own success? Would you have walked away from a story that demanded to be remembered? Or would you have done exactly what I did, sacrificing everything to honor Miss Baker? I was a nervous, overly eager research assistant straight out of graduate school back in the late 1970s. I had this wide-eyed, naive belief that history was all about presidents and treaties, the grand human gestures. My mentor, Dr. Alara, a brilliant but completely detached physicist, tasked me with archiving some newly declassified documents from the early days of the American space program. It was dusty, tedious work, mostly technical schematics and telemetry data. But tucked away in a file labeled biological payloads, I found her. Her name was Miss Baker. She wasn't the star, not like the chimpanzees or the dogs everyone knew about. She was just a footnote, a squirrel monkey selected for the critical Jupiter AM-18 suborbital flight in 1959. I remember the air conditioning in the archive room humming, but suddenly I felt this bone-deep chill as I looked at her selection photo. She was tiny, maybe 1.5 pounds, with these enormous, intelligent, terrified eyes. She looked like a child about to be sent into a crucible. I started reading every line of every document about her. The mission was pure terror disguised as science. This was the Cold War. The space race was boiling, and the U.S. needed to know if a mammal could survive the sheer brutality of launch, weightlessness, and re-entry before they put a man in a capsule. They chose Miss Baker and another monkey, a larger rhesus named Abel. I read the logs detailing the preparation, and it still makes my stomach clench. They implanted medical sensors, wiring them directly into the monkeys, a brutal, invasive procedure. The reports described her as cooperative and alert, but I could read between those sterile scientific lines. I could see the confusion, the fear, the ultimate betrayal of trust. They strapped her into this cylindrical capsule, hardly bigger than a coffee can, custom-made for her tiny frame. She was alone, sealed away, the ultimate passenger on a terrifying journey. I'd spend my nights sketching the capsule, trying to feel the claustrophobia she must have endured. It stopped being an academic exercise. It became a personal haunting. Then came the day, May 28, 1959. The rocket, a Jupiter missile, roared into the sky. The flight itself lasted just 16 agonizing minutes. I studied the telemetry data, the immense vibration, the instantaneous zero-G, the brutal atmospheric drag on re-entry that heated the capsule to near breaking point. I tried to imagine that small heart beating inside that metallic coffin, alone in the blackness, feeling forces that would crush a lesser creature. I would sit for hours running those numbers through my head, trying to quantify the level of courage she must have possessed. When the capsule splashed down and was recovered, the world held its breath. The news broke. Both Abel and Baker were recovered alive. It was a monumental triumph. She had survived a tiny furry miracle. But then, the heartbreak. Just 4 days after the mission, Abel tragically died during a post-flight surgery from a reaction to the anesthesia. Suddenly, Miss Baker wasn't just a survivor. She was the survivor. The sole living proof that a higher primate could endure the rigors of spaceflight. The weight of the entire program's biological success landed squarely on her small shoulders. The Navy, realizing the propaganda potential, made her a celebrity. They flew her to the Naval Aerospace Medical Center in Pensacola, Florida. She was paraded for the press, given a medal, and became a symbol of American triumph. I saw footage of her meeting the public, always so composed, so patient, as if she knew her job wasn't over. She married another monkey, a mate named Big George, and later a monkey named Norman. She became the nation's sweetheart. I followed her life through every scrap of newsprint I could find, realizing that her survival wasn't a lucky accident. It was a testament to an incredible resilience that defied the cold logic of science. She was a celebrity, but in my heart she was a prisoner of her own heroism, forced to live out her days under the blinding, constant spotlight. My obsession deepened when I started tracking her longevity. Squirrel monkeys usually live to be about 15. Miss Baker? She kept going. 18 years, 20 years, 25 years. She lived on and on, a quiet, living legend at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. Every birthday was a national event. I realized that her entire life after 1959 was a monument to the resilience of life itself. The flight hadn't broken her. It had, impossibly, extended her. She eventually passed away in 1984 at the incredible, record-breaking age of 27 years old. When I read the news of her death, I felt an actual physical grief, as if I had lost a close family member. I hadn't even met her, yet she was the most important figure in my life. I knew I had to go to Huntsville. I had to see where she was finally laid to rest. So I had the full story, the terrifying launch, the tragic loss of Abel, the decades of quiet, dignified celebrity, and the record-breaking lifespan. All of it leading to a single point in the ground. I had documented everything, yet I felt utterly incomplete. I knew exactly what I wanted my final act of biography to be. I wanted to tell the world about the tombstone. Before I tell you about my trip to Huntsville, about what I saw, and about the absolutely insane commitment I made on that small patch of grass, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have just written the book and moved on? Or would you have felt the call to physically, emotionally, and financially commit yourself to maintaining her memory? What does a hero deserve, even if that hero has fur and a tail? I drove to Huntsville, a pilgrimage that felt less like a research trip and more like a necessary confrontation with my own emotional core. When I finally reached the U.S. Space and Rocket Center, I felt the reverence in the air. I walked across the grounds, past the enormous rockets, until I found a small, quiet patch of grass. And there it was, a simple stone, flat to the ground, marked Miss Baker, first animal recovered from space May 28, 1959, and just as the blurry archive photo had shown, a fresh, beautiful, slightly bruised banana lay perfectly centered on the stone. It wasn't the museum doing it. It was the visitors, the people who remembered, the children who learned her story and knew instinctively the perfect tribute. That banana was a silent language of love, bravery, and respect. It was the emotional climax of her entire 27-year life. I wept, standing there. I wasn't weeping for her death. I was weeping for the incredible, beautiful, spontaneous recognition she received. And in that moment, I knew my academic detachment was gone forever. I couldn't just write a book. My life's work had to be ensuring that that banana tradition never ever died. I introduced myself to the museum director, not as Dr. So-and-so, but as Miss Baker's keeper. I poured my own modest savings into a small legal fund, officially named the Miss Baker Perpetual Banana Fund. The director, bless his soul, thought I was absolutely mad, but he appreciated the sincerity. I didn't just write a check and walk away. I became a permanent fixture, organizing small, quiet annual observances on the anniversary of her flight and her death. I wrote letters to schools, telling her story, always ending with the plea, "If you visit, bring a banana." I faced ridicule from my former colleagues who saw my work as sentimental nonsense, a waste of academic rigor. My career took a detour. The serious papers I wrote were overshadowed by the banana man's quirky devotion. But I didn't care. The consequence for me was a profound, almost spiritual satisfaction. The climax wasn't a confrontation with a villain. It was the quiet, daily confrontation with the apathy of time. I fought to keep her name relevant, and I succeeded. Today, decades later, you can still find her grave, and I guarantee you almost every single day there is a banana or two resting on her tombstone. A perfect yellow curve of gratitude. The aftermath for Miss Baker? She has achieved immortality, not through some grand statue, but through the enduring, simple tribute of a piece of fruit that represents the terrifying journey, the successful recovery, the long, peaceful life, and the love of a nation. I gave her the enduring memory she deserved, and that's the long, strange, wonderful story of how a small, frightened squirrel monkey became the most important person in my life. I truly believe that the greatest heroes are the ones who don't choose their destiny, but fulfill it anyway. Her life, Ending with a banana on her grave taught me more about courage and devotion than any textbook ever could. Like this video if you are on my side in defending Miss Baker's legacy and think her story should be mandatory reading. Subscribe for more stories like this where I dive into the hidden emotional corners of history. And please, share your final thoughts on the Perpetual Banana Fund in the comments section. Did I do the right thing? I'll see you all in the next story.